My beloved child, stop scrolling for just a moment. Do not rush past these words, because something in this message is reaching for the part of you that has been quietly wondering, quietly waiting, quietly asking why someone you love has suddenly become so distant. What you are about to hear is a fictional spiritual message created for reflection and inspiration, but let yourself enter the story as though heaven has opened a door for you at precisely the moment you needed it most. There is something you have not been told, something your soulmate has been carrying alone, and the decision they just made may look like rejection from the outside, but the truth beneath it is far more painful, far more complicated, and far more emotional than you realize. Pause here, take one slow breath, because if your heart has recently felt a strange silence, if you have noticed a change in someone's energy, if a conversation ended without the answers you deserved, or if someone you love suddenly began pulling away when everything seemed to be moving closer, then this story begins exactly there. You thought the distance meant they stopped caring. They may have been distancing themselves because they cared too much, and before this part of the story ends, you are going to understand why their heart reached a place where it believed walking away was the only way to protect something it could no longer explain. But there is a deeper layer, and that layer is the reason they desperately need you to know why first. Imagine a quiet room late at night. The lights are low, the world outside has gone still. Your soulmate is sitting alone, staring at a message they have written but have not sent. They read it once, then again. Their finger hovers over the screen. They type your name. They erase it. They begin again. There are words they want to say, but every version sounds too vulnerable. Every sentence exposes too much. Every honest confession risks changing everything. So they put the phone down. They close their eyes, and for a moment, they allow themselves to feel everything they have been trying not to feel. They miss you. That is the first truth. But missing you is not even the hardest part. The hardest part is that they have convinced themselves that loving you may require them to make a decision that breaks their own heart, and this is where the story becomes difficult. Because sometimes a person does not walk away because love disappeared. Sometimes they walk away because they believe they are not enough to carry the love they feel. Your soulmate has been fighting a private battle that you could not see. There were nights when they wanted to reach for you. There were mornings when your name appeared in their thoughts before they were even fully awake. There were ordinary moments, a song, a familiar place, a certain time of day, a passing scent, a phrase someone said, that unexpectedly brought you back into their mind, and every time it happened, something inside them softened, then fear returned. What if I hurt them? What if I disappoint them? What if I cannot become the person they deserve? What if I go toward them and everything falls apart? Those questions became louder than their desire to speak. So they did something heartbreaking. They chose silence, not because silence was easier, because they believed silence would cause less damage, but silence has a strange way of becoming its own kind of pain. The more they stayed quiet, the more they imagined what you must think. They imagined you believing they did not care. They imagined you deciding to move on. They imagined you finding someone who could give you the certainty they were too afraid to give, and still, they remained silent. Why? because somewhere along the way, they made a decision in their heart. They told themselves, if I love this person, maybe I should let them go. That sentence became a prison. They repeated it when they missed you. They repeated it when they wanted to call. They repeated it when they saw something they knew you would have loved. They repeated it when loneliness became unbearable. But the human heart is not easily convinced by words spoken against its deepest truth. And theirs kept returning to you, again, and again, and again. You may have wondered why certain memories suddenly feel stronger than before, why a person you thought you had finally stopped thinking about suddenly appears in your mind without warning, why your emotions rise at unexpected moments, why you sometimes feel as though there is an unfinished conversation hanging somewhere between you and another person. In this fictional spiritual story, imagine that heaven is not telling you that every feeling is a supernatural sign. Instead, imagine it is inviting you to look deeper, to recognize that unresolved love can echo through memory, intuition, dreams, and silence long after words have disappeared. And your soulmate has been living inside that echo. There was a moment when they almost came back. They almost reached out, almost. Their hand moved toward the phone. They opened your conversation. They stared at the last thing you said. And then something happened. A memory came back. Not a painful memory, a beautiful one. They remembered the way you made them feel when they were not pretending. They remembered a moment when they could be completely themselves. They remembered the feeling of being understood without having to explain every wound, and that memory frightened them, because it reminded them that what they were trying to leave behind was not ordinary. It mattered, you mattered, and suddenly the decision they had made felt impossible to carry. They wanted to reverse it, but pride whispered, you already chose. Fear whispered, it is too late. Shame whispered, they deserve better. And somewhere beneath all those voices was the quietest voice of all, love. Love whispered, go back. But they did not yet. Instead, they made their decision even harder. They decided to create more distance. They thought if they became colder, you would stop waiting. If they answered less, you would stop asking questions. If they disappeared for long enough, perhaps your heart would finally release them. They convinced themselves that hurting you once through distance was better than hurting you repeatedly through uncertainty. But they did not understand something. You cannot protect another person's heart by making decisions for it, and this is where their greatest regret began, because the moment they chose distance, they also created the possibility of losing the one person they never truly wanted to lose. That thought has been haunting them. They have asked themselves whether they made the worst decision of their life. And there is one particular question they keep returning to: what if they misunderstood me? What if you thought the silence meant indifference? What if you believed the distance meant someone else had replaced you? What if you decided they never loved you? That possibility hurts them more than they expected. Because they know their behavior has not told the story their heart wanted to tell. Their actions said, I am leaving. Their heart said, please understand why I am afraid. Those two messages cannot peacefully exist together, and now they are trapped between them. My beloved child, There are moments in life when a person becomes so overwhelmed by what they feel that they begin making choices from fear instead of truth. This is not an excuse for hurting someone. It is not a promise that someone will return. It is simply the emotional landscape of this story. And your soulmate is standing in that landscape right now, looking at a road they chose and wondering whether they have gone too far down it to turn around. But something happened recently, something small, something almost insignificant from the outside, yet it shook them. They encountered something that reminded them of you. Maybe it was a song, maybe a photograph, maybe a familiar place, maybe a conversation, maybe a name that appeared unexpectedly. Whatever it was, it opened a door they had been trying desperately to keep closed, and behind that door was everything they had buried. The apology they never gave, the explanation they never offered, the affection they tried to hide, the fear they never admitted, and one realization they were not prepared to face. They did not actually want to forget you. They wanted to stop being afraid of what loving you might require from them. That is a very different thing. And tonight, in the fictional world of this message, they are sitting with that realization. They are beginning to understand that running from a feeling does not make the feeling disappear. It only makes the heart carry it alone. There is something else you need to understand. Their heartbreaking decision was not made in one dramatic moment. It was built slowly, one disappointment at a time, one fear at a time, one unanswered question at a time, one moment of self-doubt after another. Perhaps they compared themselves to people from your past. Perhaps they believed you deserved someone more confident. Perhaps circumstances made them believe the timing was wrong. Perhaps they were carrying responsibilities they never knew how to explain. Perhaps they were afraid of committing to something their heart wanted because they had once trusted someone and paid a heavy emotional price. Whatever the reason, their mind began constructing a wall, and walls do not appear overnight. They are built brick by brick. A little silence here, a little avoidance there, a delayed reply, a conversation they refused to have, a feeling they pushed down, a truth they pretended did not matter, until eventually, the wall became so tall that even they could not see what was waiting on the other side, you. And that is why this story is not finished, because something is changing inside them, not magically, not instantly, but quietly. The person who once believed leaving was the only answer is beginning to question the answer itself. They are remembering that you never asked them to be perfect. You only wanted honesty. You never needed them to have every answer. You needed them to stop pretending they had none. And now they are realizing that the heartbreaking decision they made may have been based on an assumption you never agreed to. They assumed you would be happier without them. They assumed their absence would protect you. They assumed they were doing the noble thing. But what if you would have preferred the truth? What if you would have chosen an honest conversation over a perfect goodbye? What if the very thing they thought would save you is the thing that hurt you most? That question has been growing inside them, and it is becoming impossible to silence. There is a message they want you to hear, not necessarily a literal message, not necessarily a text arriving tonight, but a truth buried underneath everything they did. I did not leave because you meant nothing to me. I left because you meant more than I knew how to handle. I was afraid my broken parts would eventually break you. I thought distance would protect you from me. I did not understand that distance could hurt you too. And there is one more sentence, the sentence they are most afraid to admit: I still care. That is the confession they have been running from, because admitting they still care means admitting the decision they made did not bring the peace they expected. It means facing the possibility that they may have walked away from something they were not ready to lose, and if they come back, they know they cannot come back with the same heart that left. Something would have to change. They would have to speak. They would have to explain. They would have to stop hiding behind pride. They would have to risk hearing the answer they fear most. And that is why they are hesitating, because there is a difference between missing someone and being brave enough to face them. Your soulmate may be discovering that difference right now, and you may be wondering, if they care so deeply, why have they not done anything? Because love and courage are not always born at the same speed. A person can love someone and still be terrified. A person can miss someone and still remain silent. A person can regret leaving and still not know how to return. But the silence is becoming harder for them to maintain. Something inside them has shifted. The decision that once felt final is beginning to feel temporary. The wall they built is beginning to show cracks. And behind those cracks is a truth they cannot keep hidden forever. They did not make that heartbreaking decision because the story meant nothing. They made it because the story meant too much, and they did not trust themselves to carry it. But there is a deeper reason beneath even that, a reason they have not told anyone. A reason connected to a moment from their past that changed the way they understand love, a reason that explains why they became frightened precisely when they began feeling closest to you, and when that memory finally comes to the surface, you will understand why their decision looked so cruel from the outside while feeling, to them, like the only escape they had left. But that part of the story has not been revealed yet. Because tonight, they are standing at the edge of a choice. One road leads deeper into silence. The other leads directly toward the truth. And just before they make that choice, something unexpected is about to happen. Something that could force them to confront the one thing they have spent all this time avoiding: your name. And when your name enters that moment, they will finally have to decide whether protecting themselves is worth losing you. That is where we will leave the door open for now. Because the heartbreaking decision was only the beginning, the real story is why they made it, and what they discovered after they thought it was already too late. My beloved child, stop scrolling for just a moment. Do not rush past these words. Something is waiting for you here, something your heart may have already sensed but could never explain. What you are about to hear was meant to find you at a moment when your emotions are unusually open, because somewhere beyond what your eyes can see, someone connected to your story has been carrying a decision they never wanted to make. And the hardest part is this: they have not made this decision because they stopped caring. They may have made it because they care more deeply than they know how to explain. Pause here, take one slow breath, because the person you have been wondering about, the person whose silence has left questions inside your mind, the person whose name can still change the entire atmosphere of your heart, may be standing at an emotional crossroads right now. They have been fighting a private battle between what they feel and what they believe they must do, and you were never supposed to see the battle. You were only supposed to see the distance. You were only supposed to notice the unanswered message, the strange silence, the sudden change in energy, the hesitation, the moments when they seemed close and then disappeared again. But heaven sees what people hide. Heaven sees the conversation they had with themselves when nobody was watching. Heaven sees the tears they wiped away before anyone could notice. Heaven sees the message they typed and deleted. Heaven sees the moment they almost reached for you, then stopped themselves because something inside them whispered, "Not yet." And my beloved child, that is why you may have felt something was unfinished. You were not imagining the unfinished feeling. There are connections that do not disappear simply because two people stop speaking. There are bonds that become quieter without becoming weaker. There are moments when distance does not mean the story has ended. Sometimes distance is the place where truth finally becomes impossible to avoid. Your soulmate has been confronting a truth, and that truth has frightened them, not because you are frightening, not because your love is wrong, but because being close to you would require them to become honest about parts of themselves they have spent a long time hiding. They have been able to run from many things. They have run from difficult conversations. They have run from memories. They have run from vulnerability. They have run from the possibility of being rejected. They have run from the fear that they might not be enough. But lately, something has changed. Running has become harder, because every road they take seems to lead their thoughts back to you. They can distract themselves during the day. They can surround themselves with noise. They can laugh with other people. They can pretend everything is normal. But then the night comes. The room becomes quiet. The world stops demanding answers. And suddenly, there you are again, not physically, not necessarily in front of them, but in their thoughts, in their memories, in the questions they cannot silence. What if I had been honest? What if I had not walked away? What if they were waiting for me? What if I ruined something I was supposed to protect? And there is one question that has been haunting them more than all the others. What if they think I never loved them? My child, listen carefully, that question matters. Because there is something your soulmate desperately wishes you understood before you judge their decision. Their distance was never as simple as it looked. There were emotions behind it that you could not see. There were pressures behind it that you were never told about. There were fears they did not have the courage to place into words. And recently, they reached a point where they believed they had only two choices: stay close to you and risk hurting you with everything they were still struggling to heal, or walk away and convince themselves that leaving was an act of love.